Hi, everybody. We are here with a new group of people discussing part one of our current book that we're reading for ELL Book Chat, which is Boosting Achievement. Last week we read the foreword and the introduction, and then this week we're going to be discussing part one. So I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll pass it down, and we can hear from everyone just to make sure that we know everyone who's participating. My name is Katie Tupple, and I am a K-5 ELD specialist in Oregon. I'm also an adjunct professor at Portland State, and I teach classes in their ESOL endorsement series. So I love that dichotomy of teaching young kids, but then also teaching teachers who are learning how to teach those young kids. Next up, we have Tan, and I have to say that I have mispronounced your name, as have many people on Twitter. So it is Tan, correct?
It's Tan or Tan, it doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay, because as we're talking about students and making relationships and pronouncing names correctly, I was thinking, pretty sure I said it wrong. And I just want to make sure that I'm not, because as an important member and co-founder of ELL Book Chat, we need to be saying your name right.
Oh, thanks. I answered all of those names. It doesn't matter. It's fine. My name is Tan. I am a teacher at the International School of Vientiane International School in Laos. I teach English language development and co-founder of the book club. But really, it's just like the driving force is Katie. And I blog on a blog called empoweringEOLs.com. Nice to meet everybody.
I'm glad you're joining us today.
Thanks.
All right, Shelly.
Hi, I'm Shelly Santiago, ESL instructional coach in Ames, Iowa, and been a longtime participant in LChat Book Club, although sometimes I get behind. So I'm proud to say that I'm keeping up this time in terms of the reading, and happy to be on the chat tonight.
Welcome. And Shaylee's also, I'm connected with Shelly on Goodreads, which is a great app for just kind of tracking and documenting the books that you are reading, the books that you want to read. That's my favorite, is keeping a list. And she does a lot of great reviews. So, and you also write reviews for, is it?
I'm
a little bit.
Mid-TESOL, I'm on the board for Mid-TESOL, and so I occasionally do weekly feature posts for them.
That's great. And next is a new face for me. Would you introduce yourself? Because I'm not sure. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sarah.
Okay, now it pops up.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I am an elementary ESL teacher in Frisco ISD, Frisco, Texas, which is North Texas. And we do kind of the pull-out model. I'm on 2 campuses, and I pull out small groups of ESL students every day. And so I'm excited to be a part of this.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And next is Emily.
All right, let me unmute myself. You'll hear my little one in the background playing her birthday songs, and yeah, she's there. Well, I'm happy to be here and join you guys. All of you are my Edu heroes, right? I love joining the club, the book club. I think this is my second time. I tried the first time with the, what was the one that I joined first? The conversational.
Conversation.
Yes, I never finished it, but yes, I'll definitely go back and look into the questions. But I'm an ESL teacher. I teach kindergarten through 5th grade. I do the pull-out, the inclusion model, and I'm just happy to join you guys. Great club.
Thank you. And Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Salva, along with, I'm super grateful to Anna Mattis, who is my coworker at Sidlets Education. We are consultants for Sidlets Ed, and so we're ESL consultants. I also still teach high school. I teach a newcomer class that has a certain percentage that are SIFE kiddos. And Anna and I wrote the book that we're studying right now, Boosting Achievement. And I'm very grateful to Katie and Tan for having this book club, because I've done other books with them, and it's an incredible learning opportunity. So I want to say thanks for just having the club. Thanks to all of you guys that are here tonight, and everybody this is a big book club. I feel like this time I'm real excited to be a part of it. It's deepening my learning, and so thank you. That's me.
Welcome. And I think that this round is revolutionizing our book club, because you are very active as an author in posting and retweeting and really kind of synthesizing what other people are saying and replying back, which I think is really important, that when you're reading the book and you're commenting, it's nice to have that feedback from someone else, that they like your post or they get a comment back, especially from one of the authors, which is really exciting. But also adding these Google Hangouts and the Padlet and the Flipgrid. That was really fun this week, seeing the kind of overall reflection videos from different people on Flipgrid. I loved listening to them, and everybody had different things to say, and even with the amount of time, some people needed more time to talk, and then there was a comment that 1.5 minutes is way too long and that it should be shortened, because in all honesty, that might, things like that make students nervous, and it's important to kind of know what's going to work and what's not going to work for your students.
I thought that was very profound, that everything we're trying, being brave in different media, because it's unnerving. And I think that's such a great example for kids. And so many people I know stepped up and did that Flipgrid that weren't comfortable doing it, but every one of them turned out awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and my map today, I don't think was a success, but I had this vision that it would be really cool to have a map where everybody could put their pin to show how widespread this book chat is, because I feel like it's the most kind of well participated of all of the ones we've had. And I think that is out there, but I don't think I executed it correctly, but maybe I'll try again. I think you have to invite everyone via email I'm not sure, but when I went back and looked, I thought this doesn't look like it was effective. So I might try to revise or use something different. I don't know.
We've got time. We've got 3 weeks more, 3.5 more weeks.
Yeah. So let's talk about part 1. Does anybody want to start us off, or shall I? Okay, I'm going to go for it. One of the things that I love, that I feel like is unique about this book, honestly, is that it's in color, because I feel like these students they just come to life. I was taking photos of my students for Andrea for one of her books, and I was imagining, my students being on the pages of a book, and I just think it's got to be so empowering for them that they have this actual book that all of these teachers are reading and their faces are right there. So seeing the different students on the pages and kind of the classroom aspects in action, I really liked. Just aesthetically, this book is very beautiful. But I imagine, like, if you're these guys right here, you're in a book. That's amazing. I was excited enough to see my name printed in it, but never mind photos. It's just that's really empowering. And I hope that do they get copies?
Yeah. I know. Don't you think they need to have copies? And so
maybe their coffee table book forevermore in their home.
I think their parents are very happy that, because we asked the parents, of course, we asked for permission to use anybody who's in the book. And there were kids who didn't want to be represented, and that was fine. And so every time we had video, I would not show, or photographers come in, they would not be on that part of the room. The girls just knew it was my girls who were very, very shy, and they would just move. So we got copies of the kids who, the ones who are still around, we have kind of a mobile, like a lot of people, kids move before we had a chance to get everybody a book. But lots did, and I love that, because half those kids in that book, or at least a chunk of those kiddos, were from the year prior, where I had mostly all SIFE, and I tell them at the beginning of the book about the African refugee class in the introduction, and some of those kids are still in my high school now. That was when I was in middle school, and this year I'm in high school, and we have a different newcomer class. It's an elective course where I have kids who come from affluence, and they're international kids. We have and they're all newcomers. And I also have kids that are still coming from Africa, from refugee camps, and they're all in the same ESL class. So it's a bit of a challenge. Shelly and I were going to try to connect on that at some point, of what you do when not everybody's SIFE, when it's only a few. And that's my reality this year.
I think it's interesting, though, to see kind of all the different, I'm looking at page 12 with all the different labels that you've outlined in a chart, the difference between newcomer, refugee, migrant, things like that. I was reading I think it's the assessment book I'm currently reading that actually defines a SIFE student as middle or high school. And I was thinking about whether or not I agree with that. Do they have to be that old in order to have experienced that interruption, or could SIFE students also be elementary, which I think they could? I mean, if you miss a few years and you come and you're a 5th grader or 4th grader in elementary school, you certainly have interrupted schooling. I just found that interesting, that definitions and labels and all of that. And I was thinking about when go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm going to respond to what I think you're saying is, what is the age? What is that actual definition? And it's a little gray. And if somebody knows something more updated, please interrupt me and let me know, because in Texas, it's defined a certain way. And then nationally, it's I think it's defined a different way. A lot of people say it has to be a certain number of years that they've been out of school to technically be SIFE. I think I saw recently where it's typically 4th through that Newcomer toolkit that has been tweeted recently. That one defines it as 4th grade through 12th grade. But I've seen it defined as secondary, mostly secondary. We couldn't find in Texas, because it's important, because our accountability, it matters, because SIFE students don't count it for accountability. It counts for the student. The student still needs to meet all the requirements for graduation and all of that. But it's important for campuses to understand if there's going to be something tied to the SIFE label, like how it affects accountability. And I couldn't find anything in Texas that was definitive. It just said, a significant number of years off. I have seen before where it said 3 years more off, but I can't find anything in the TEA literature. So if somebody finds that, send that to me. But our district is going with, I believe, 3 or more years out of school and new to school norms, things like that. I don't know. It's gray.
I thought Carlota brought up a really interesting point about foster students, because you think of that term interrupted. That interrupted is not necessarily an absence of school for 3 years, but maybe just kind of that constant moving or uncertainty. And she said that her thought was that foster students do experience some similar circumstances as SIFE students. There's a little bit of overlap. So it's just a reminder that even if a student maybe doesn't have that particular label in terms of language needs or whatnot, that cultural responsiveness and all of those gestures of building trust and things that we've been tweeting about this week really would apply to that group of students too.
And if I can just add to that, I think it's important, even if it's a county or as a state, there's no label or definition that we can give our students. I think personally as a teacher, we should take it upon ourselves to find out what the background is for our students. How many years have they missed? I mean, a lot of countries, for example, my country, 3rd grade is the highest grade that the majority achieves. And when they come here, they have missed so many years of school. So I think if we take it upon ourselves learning what was the highest grade level that they attended in their country, because if we are going to support their native language, we need to know whether they can read it or not. So I think it's important, even if like our county doesn't have like a newcomer per se program. They all in mainstream classrooms, but I think as a classroom teacher, it's important for them to know where they're coming from, where they've been, and I don't know, it's just to better support them, I would say.
And one of the things that I was wondering last week is kind of that I posed a question is, how do teachers go about uncovering those stories and that information? Because I'm a kind of an introvert anyway, and I have a hard time with small talk and asking questions that, kind of relate to very personal circumstances is not something that comes easily to me. So I always look for kind of some go-to ways to navigate that type of conversation, because if families are coming and it's a refugee situation, I would wonder, are they going to be comfortable to talk? How do I go about building that trust so that the family will know that my only purpose is to be the best possible educator I can be for for their family. So if any of you has suggestions about how you've dealt with that with families, of kind of that initial process of building rapport so that you can access information from them, I would love to know.
What I would do, and just building that rapport with parents. I had one parent that came in, he just said he just wanted to talk. And he came in my classroom, it was just me and him. And I mean, honest to God, he was just pouring his heart out. He was crying, telling me his background, his story. I think once parents and students too, when they see that they feel comfortable, when they see that they can trust you, they open up and they'll tell you everything about them. But you have to build that. You have to show them that you really care for them to be able to show you and tell you who they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I could chime in. Hello?
Who is it? Shelly? Oh, no, is this Damaris?
Yes.
Please introduce yourself too.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to figure out how to.
Uh-oh, you got stuck, Damaris.
All my kids are refugee type students. And so how we establish, especially relationships with our families, because we have many different cultures, is we really work with our refugee resettlement agency, and they provide us with translators. And so having translators in those parent conferences really allow for us to, one, build relationships with them, and to just create an understanding of our purpose in school and how we're here to help them. The translators are usually the ones who go to their first doctor's appointments with them and help them when they're here, or their caseworkers. So it's really a community effort into helping parents once they get here and learning more of their stories.
And I was going to add, in the high school that I worked in previously, when I was still in the classroom, we had a form that we would use to interview each of the students. And I think at the high school level, they're comfortable enough to talk and tell a little bit about themselves. And especially if it's something that you're doing with everybody, it's not like I'm singling out just one or two students. And so it's just a list of questions about them and what their school background is, their family, how many siblings, where do they fall in that order. Just a basic list that we kind of go through, and then that gives us an opportunity to start to talk and build some connections and relationships with the students. I also have done kind of a introduce yourself type of unit at the beginning of the school year, and that type of thing, where you allow them, it's part of the assignment, where they're telling about themselves and what's important to them, and what they hope to accomplish for the school year. I think is another good way to find out more information about the students beyond just what comes in the file, assuming there is any kind of file that follows them.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have an idea about that? And your question specifically, Katie, was just like how you get to know your students when they first arrive and you may not speak the same language?
Just kind of how to navigate being inquisitive when families may not feel comfortable sharing yet, or that they may just be dealing with challenges that they aren't wanting to then talk to you about. I just, kind of all of that together, of how do you show them that really you are someone that they can trust.
I think Emily hit it, like once, at least for us, because my class grew so big this year again, then we had, y'all hear me talk about Kahoot a lot, that we play these Kahoot games that everybody loves, and the kids can play those immediately because it's just not that difficult to interact with it. But I have a couple of
Where'd she go?
I don't know.
Carol, are you there? Carol, did you freeze?
Oh,
I think she froze.
well, is she back? I was gonna say something while she was out, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, so the past few years, parent communication has been one of the things that I brought into my administrators at the end of the year as this is a weakness for me. This is something that I feel like I need to do better for the next year. And then I wouldn't really succeed in that. And so the next year, at the end of the year, I would come in again and say, this is something I need to do better. And I will say that this is the first year that I feel like I've kind of rocked it a little bit, a little much to the point where I actually became a part of some of my students' families. I mean, I just had a birthday a few weeks ago, and my parents, they texted me and they said, we want to have a birthday party for you at our house. We want you to come over. We're going to do cake. We're going to get pizza. And I mean, it's been such a great experience just getting to know these kids, especially one in particular that was just very difficult for me to teach. I felt like there was just a personality thing we had going on. And so since I've been coming and meeting with his family at home, it has completely changed the dynamics. I feel like I understand this kid better. And all of a sudden, when we're in the classroom and he's a challenge for me, I know what I need to say to be able to get him to kind of cooperate. And so I will say that I think a big part of that has to do with I started implementing Seesaw very heavily in my class this year. And so the parents are able to get those updates. They're able to see the behind the scenes look into our classroom and what we're doing. And so because it has the ability to translate into their home languages, the parents are always well informed on the goings on. And so I kind of do what I can to reach out to them, let them know what things are going on at the school and that there will be a familiar face there, somebody friendly who will be able to welcome them to those things. And so it's been a really good year for me in just learning more about my students and that home dynamic. And I'm definitely looking for ways to improve that, but I feel like it was a big step in the right direction.
I love that you touched on the idea of home visits, because that's a huge, huge way that teachers can kind of, it's just a 1,000 points of information at once. And part of my dissertation research was about kind of what are the barriers for home visits, because they're not widespread. It's not a widespread practice. And some of the things that came up were, fear that it potentially is dangerous to go to homes, and that teachers often do it outside of their contract time. So they want to get paid. So safety and payment. And then also, like, I don't know what to do when I go there. So what's supposed to happen at a home visit? And we actually had a training this year at the very beginning of the school year, and it answered all of those questions. It was the Parent Teacher Home Visit Project, and they're on Twitter. And just everything about the questions that I had encountered was completely solved. Like, it was, you're required to go with a buddy, which was kind of addressing that safety thing of you have to go with another teacher or paraprofessional from school, so you're not alone. Teachers were paid to go on the home visits, which is possibly not something that every district would afford, but we were really happy to be given that because teachers did do them outside of their contract time. And then they gave us a very simple kind of prompt, was just, what are your dreams for your child? And they said, if you go to the house and you just ask that question and then see where it goes, that's fine. And they said, a home visit could be 15 minutes, it could be an hour. Just go with an open mind. And it kind of is a little bit uncomfortable, because sometimes we like to have our agenda of, okay, well, these are the questions I need to ask, or this is the task that I need to take care of. And that open-endedness makes us as the teacher a little uncomfortable. But that's almost the point, is one, that when you're uncomfortable, it's pushes you to kind of do more and be the listener, maybe, rather than the one that has the agenda. And the other piece was that they weren't mandatory. And so teachers were encouraged and given training, but they were not required, which I think was helpful, because, the day that an administrator stands up and says, this year, everybody's required to do home visits for all their students, teachers are going to have that, oh my God, it's one more thing on my plate. We had a first grade teacher who made appointments with every single student in her class. And she was super into it and excited and talked about it. And, it was contagious. And she brought along different partners to go with her. So a lot of other teachers got to experience it. And it's wonderful. You can really learn a lot. I went to 2, and the families were cousins. The moms were sisters. No, were they? No, the mom, one mom was the other dad. They were siblings. so the moms were sister-in-laws. And one, we learned about the jobs that they do, their holiday traditions. We learned about her cooking. She gave us some food. We saw her garden. We learned that she was the kind of in charge of their apartment complex. The father traveled a lot, just so many things. The other one was just completely different. It was more about kind of like some personal family issues and delved a little bit deeper into the mom. And in one visit, the child was there with us. In the other visit, the child was kind of not as interested in being with us, and it was more the adults talking. And so, I mean, even in extended family, the experience that we had and the information that we gleaned from those visits was totally, totally different. But I so agree with Sarah's point that once you've been there, it just gives you kind of these other avenues to connect. And that's really helpful. And that kind of then sets that foundation to be able to say, I know that this student will shut down in X circumstance, or I know that if I do ABC, that's going to get the student re-engaged, or just kind of little subtle things that you might learn from seeing the parent interact with the child and seeing the child kind of in their own space, seeing their room, seeing maybe that they share with a sibling or 4 siblings, or, you know, just there's so many points of interest. What is mom cooking? What's on the wall? You know, is there no TV? Is there a lot of TV? Just all those different things that you can kind of learn. Especially for me, I find that sometimes elementary kids don't always share those deep things about their experiences. And so going to have that visual helps me to kind of have some things that I can ask about. You know, this one mom talked about how she always put up a Christmas tree in the front of their apartment complex because she's the manager. And so then the next time I saw her, it happened to be around the holidays. And I asked her, oh, is your tree up? And it just gave us that little connection that I felt like I'm going to be a friendly person. And we kind of have a thing now that we can talk about. I love Christmas. She loves Christmas. We have a connection. And even if that's a small connection, then you build on that connection. And that's really so wonderful, because that's exactly what we're talking about, is knowing those students so that we can do what they need in the classroom. And so it's not just one size fits all. It's what do you need and what do you need and what do you need? And I have to make all those balls stay in the air and juggle everything so that all those kids are feeling like they're getting what they need from me.
So I had a thought when I saw on page 15, the list of, or the chart of the students and a little description about them. It made me think about when we do find out some of that information, whether it's from a home visit or however we've gotten it, how do you share that with the classroom teachers? And something kind of like this, especially just a little thumbnail photo of the kids and a little bit of information about their background. And I really like, you know, he's ELL and he's an asylee or refugee, or CASIUS, you know, 3 of the 4 things on this particular chart. So you can see where that falls out, just because it kind of gives you more the context when you're thinking about the student and what their needs might be in your classroom.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, because certainly we know that you can't, you know, all ELLs are not the same. And there's all of these different elements that affect kind of that child that shows up in the classroom. And making sure that all of the teachers are on the same page is quite important, especially if you get to middle and high school where there are so many different content teachers. I'm curious if you have kind of systems for sharing out. Is it via email, or are there actual face-to-face meetings where students are discussed, and what happens so that all teachers can be on the same page?
What do you guys do, Shelly? Because we have, every school I've worked at, and I've worked at many, has some kind of system for giving teachers their data. And that's why I wrote a blog post this week for people who don't have the book. And there's a difference between, everybody needs to have the data. Everybody needs to know who is, you know, classified as what and who comes from what based on their initial intake information. But then getting to know the student and who they are as a person is where we as teachers, I think, come in and open the door for that. And if they're ready to walk through that door, that's great. And if not, we just keep that door open. What do you guys do, Shelly? And Ton, I'd love to know what you guys do, because you're in a totally different kind of setting too.
So in my district, we use a spreadsheet, and we put the student's name, what country they're from, what their native language is, and then their test scores. We also mark if they're brand new to our district. So because we do have a fairly migratory population. So that list gets shared out. We're a Google Apps for Educators school, so that we share it on Google Sheets. One of my teachers has put together a folder though, because what she's found is that information is pretty dry. And if you just read the numbers, if you're not an ESL teacher, then they might not be very meaningful. And so in that folder, then she's got several documents that describe in more detail what the different numbers mean and some of the implications. And since it's a folder that's shared, she can just easily add files if she finds new stuff in the year that she wants to add. Once upon a time when I was still teaching, we used to run a hard copy of each student's scores at the bottom, and then we had a chart that said, okay, if you're this particular level, it means you can do these things, and here's how a teacher might accommodate. And so we would just highlight, this student's level 3, for example. And then the little descriptor at the bottom, we tried to put a few comments like if we knew that the student was also working and then attending school, or if they were in charge of siblings after school. So just, short little comments to try to give a little more context. And then in most cases, if a student is a SIVE student, they're going to have a high need. And so then teachers are coming and asking, for, what do I do? How do I help the student more? So that's when we might have more like a conference. But frankly, there's just not enough time to connect with everybody we need to connect with to be able to do that across the board.
What about you, Tan?
We were lucky to be in a very small school setting. So my international school, we have 150 kids, and they're not all ELLs. They come from 35 different countries. So at the beginning of the school year, we have a whole middle school and high school staff meeting. 30 teachers are there. And then we share a Google document with a student's picture and like basic information. Very like one sentence, you need to know that this is an ELL student or this is an SEN, which is students with exceptional needs. And then we say, you are assigned to this ELL specialist. And if you need anything with this child, please come with this teacher. So we have 3 staff members. And so instead of sending them a document on top of documents, but they're not quite sure how to work with, and we use terminologies that's not really friendly for them, we just say, here's a person that is your co-teacher, here's a person that's going to support you, here are the kids at least you need to know who are identified by the school as ELs. And then we that document is there to support the teachers. The goal is less is more. And then we start the collaboration.
I like the element though of having a student's picture. I mean, even if this right here was, something where you have a student's picture and then some brief information. I remember just recently we had a student of mine who was referred for special education, and the documents of all of these tests and these numbers and these, it's just so dense. And the special education teacher asked me, for any information about him. And I went to who he, like the person, the child, oh, he's really interested in cooking, and he expressed an interest in, possibly taking a music instrument in middle school or a cooking class. Those are things he wants to do. And he wants to be an explorer when he grows up, like National Geographic or like Steve Irwin. So he likes the outdoors and he likes animals. And those are the types of things that he would like to read about. And he's a big brother, and he's really good with his younger siblings, and just those types of things that sometimes can get lost in the translation. And those are the things that maybe one teacher finds out, he is the student that I focus most of my relationship building on. He's just my special one. I adore him. And there might be things that I find out about him anecdotally that I don't necessarily formally share with any teacher who works with him. So I'm kind of thinking sometimes those types of things also get lost in translation, that we might have the data shared, but then we don't have those other pieces of information that, if I know he's into cooking and that might help inspire him for math, I should be sharing that with his teacher who is dealing with him struggling in a math class. I'm thinking for, you always get ideas during the summer about what to do for the next school year. Some way of just kind of logging or keeping track so that things like that get shared out with other teachers. Because even in elementary school, they go to their homeroom teacher, but then they might have a different reading teacher, and they have intervention teachers sometimes, and PE teacher, music teacher. There are quite a few teachers even at that level. So it would be nice to kind of have some system so that everybody can be in the know when it comes to those traits that make our students who they are.
We have a thing, and I'm so impressed with the high school where I work this year. They have any kiddos, you know, we're coming up on a grading period, and any kiddos halfway through or whatever that are having trouble and struggling, the teachers meet once a week, you know, and they talk about anybody who's on this list who's at risk for whatever's going on right now. So they're sitting around, there's dedicated time, planning time, where those teachers come together and talk. And they invited me once to come, and there were several kiddos who had been with me in the middle school the year before, but reading had gotten to a point where it wasn't obvious that they were safe. They looked like any other student who was just a struggling reader in high school. And so hearing from the different teachers of what issues the kiddos were having in class, and for me to be able to say, well, you know, he just got to the country and he was born in a camp where there wasn't any running water or electricity. So until he was about 14, so that was about 2 years ago. So actually his being able to read your text at any level is pretty, and all the teachers were really appreciative of that information because, you know, that data, they get data, but it doesn't really resonate the way a personal story does. And, you know, not that you need to cut him that much slack. If he's reading at this level, I mean, one thing that I think is worth everybody thinking about is if we could ramp those kids up in my middle school class to second, third grade reading level in, you know, half a year's time because they were motivated to do that. And you think about the entire world is given text at an 8th grade reading level, ability of a newspaper, the New York Times, things that come out, maybe not the New York Times, but most magazines are published at an 8th grade readability level because you have all different levels of readers out there. So these kids are not that far off. Even when they come into high school below level, they're not our only kids who come in reading below level either.
That reminds me.
There's ways to ramp that up.
That reminds me also of the part where you talked about how students need to not just learn the content, but they kind of need to learn how to integrate culturally. And that reminds me of Eric Jensen's book on poverty, about how, you know, a lot of times teachers receive behavior as defiance or kind of inappropriate behavior, but what they don't understand is that that students need explicit instruction in what the expectation is or how to maneuver in something. And students can't necessarily just come in and watch other kids and know. Sometimes they need the teacher to be a little bit more explicit about what they should do. You know, what happens when they walk into the classroom? Where are they supposed to go? Where should they sit? You know, what materials do they need? Things like just, you know, how they interact, that can't be something that we forget to do, because for students who are brand new to the country, and particularly if they are refugee students or they've been living in camps, the circumstances are quite different and they might not intuitively know how to navigate the things that we would expect other students to be able to do. And it's not fair to them if they're just expected to kind of fill in and get going. They might need that time to have things.
And I think being aware of that is important, but I don't want to, like, newcomer centers and advocates for newcomer centers, and I love what's going on in some newcomer center. I've been so impressed with some that I've visited, and I know people use that as they need to be acclimated and ramp up on how to do school. But don't underestimate a smile on your face and routines in classroom, how fast someone, if I dropped you in Russia and it was a totally different way they did school there, you would catch it on pretty quick because everybody else is doing it. And you are an older learner that can follow the lead. It's when there's chaos. I think that's such a good point, Katie, that routines for any English language learner, not even SIVE, is critical. They are critical.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else notable from this section of the book that anybody wanted to bring up or discuss this week?
I did want to say that I'm going to tweak that new toolkit from ed.gov because it does have a really great breakdown. I know you probably can't see this, but it has a really great chart. You can't see that. It's got a really great chart that defines asylee, English learner, foreign-born, immigrant children, new American, refugee, SIFE, and unaccompanied youth. So a lot of these terms, even if we're ESL teachers, we get confused because my district has a definition for what we're going to call SIFE. We have the flexibility of going, it's either this much or more, but we're in Texas and that might be different than your states. But since this comes from a national toolkit that's put out by our, ed.gov, I think it's important for people to have this in their back pocket to know how it's defined nationally, some of these terms.
Yeah, for sure.
And what they say is, like we thought, 4th through 12th grade, who have experienced disruptions in their education in their native countries and or the United States, and or are unfamiliar with the culture of schooling. And so to me, I try to check those at the door. I want to know, but then I want to think, okay, I might have kids in here who are not technically SIFE, but are on the same level as that kid. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to figure out where you are with literacy. And then we're going to ramp it up as fast as we can, because no matter what story you come with, there's some gifts and some things that you can capitalize on. And so we just go from there.
That reminds me of a question that I was thinking as I was reading this, but also reading Gottlieb's book on assessment. And she talks about the different phases of assessment, where in the first one, you're giving them a language assessment. The second one, you're finding out their literacy in their native language. And that's a step that doesn't happen in my school. And maybe it's because we don't have a huge population of SIFE students. I don't know, but I'm curious kind of to learn more about that phase of how teachers navigate finding out students' literacy in their native language, particularly if the native language is not Spanish, which, in a typical school, there's likely somebody who speaks Spanish, but not necessarily somebody who speaks Mandarin, or who speaks kind of languages where the population is not. I mean, even in my school, we have Marshallese students and Chukis students who we don't have any staff members that speak their language. So if we have somebody that comes in, or my student who came in as a 4th grader, and she's Tibetan, we didn't evaluate her literacy. I mean, she's very strong, but we didn't have any sort of test to determine her level. So I'm curious
I know one of you guys has a strategy for that. I'm going to go get my dog that ran down the street, and I'll be right back. So can somebody respond to that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm going to actually write a post about this in the future.
Good.
There are 2 ways, actually I think 3. The first one is the students' use of vocabulary. So I have lots of students from all over the world, and when they come, for example, I had a student from China, and when he came, he was starting to work with us. And we allow students to use Google Translate. We don't translate the whole phrase. We just translate the whole sentence. We just translate words at a time. And he used a word that was a very high academic level. I forgot what word it was. And you're like, whoa, he really does understand. Then I have another student, Ayaka. I wrote about her, and we were in design class. And though she was writing, she had to, because she was at the level where she was a total beginner to English. We had her write in Japanese in Google Translate, and then she produced it in English. And she was using sentence structures when you drop the egg off the balcony, comma, and it was like, oh wow, she was able to use it's not just drop egg from balcony. She was using that. She was using complex sentence structure. And the third one is, because I have my students read 15 minutes at the first part of the class, they can read any text they want. I have a student from Korea who is a selective mute, but he was reading a thick book in Korean. And I was like, he wasn't reading with any pictures. And I was asking him what it was about, and then he explained to me using Google Translate to explain, it was a very complex story. And I was like, wow, all these characters, all these plot turns and twists. So I guess those 3, vocab, use of vocab, sentence structures, and if the student is reading a lot in their own native language.
But it's not those are kind of informal. It's not a formal, some type of test or assessment that you're buying from somewhere. It's more of just gauging based on your professional knowledge of English and Google Translate. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I mean, I can tell you we have exactly what Ton said, is that in the first few minutes of class, we have some let's settle down and free reading time. We have free voluntary reading. And I've had people say, oh, that you're not supposed to do free voluntary reading with newcomers because they can't read yet. And okay, I beg to differ because first of all, we're creating shared text from day one. Like we're doing our social contract, we're doing our stuff, and they can read anything we create together because it's their words and I'm using comprehensible input sentence by sentence. So they have text they can read from day one. And then exactly what he said, I offer them, if we have stuff in their native language and they want to read that, and you just start to do those. I can't pull a small group for reading time, but I can rotate with my clipboard through everybody, and it's questioning and getting to know the kiddos. And very quickly you realize if they're actually able to read in their native. I mean, of course, like you said, Katie, it's not a formal assessment, but I'm just trying to determine, can we use your native language? And I encourage everybody to use their native language and don't lose your reading skills and your literacy in your native language. Try to read as much as you can in your native language, because it's going to help you read in your second language. But no, a formal assessment for some of the languages we have, we don't even have dictionaries in print for some of the languages that we have.
Yeah.
You could just simply ask them, and particularly if they were in school before, sometimes there are records that come. And so, like a quick check through their grades, were they able to pass their classes? That'll tell you something. Now, SIVE students, probably they're not bringing records like that. So, yeah.
I've also, even just when I've talked with parents and build those relationships, and I'll ask, what were they, because I teach younger kids, so I have 3rd and 4th grade SIVE refugee kids, and so their parents will tell me if they were reading in their first language. So that has been helpful as well, because again, there's no records saying what they were learning in their schools, but using parents as that liaison helps as well.
End the chat. We're coming up on an hour here in a little bit. I don't want to end without kind of flipping this. I know it was weird that I don't know if it was weird, but I included this story of this kiddo named Osama in this section because it was very profound to me. I found the email the other day where I wrote the Welcome Center, and I said, he's on page 22, I think. And I said, this kid is insisting that he should be in a higher math class. But I'm looking at the records that came when he came into our district just a couple months ago. He tested at a 7th grade level. So for him to say the algebra class, I want something more, I want something higher. And I'm like, I know, but I don't know. I don't know, because 7th grade and you want to go to geometry. But he was very insistent, and he gained so much English so quickly that he really could advocate for himself within the first few weeks of school. And so then they said in the email, it's never been done, but we'll come retest him. And sure enough, that kid graduated this year. He didn't just, I put in the book, I think, a credit by exam, but that wasn't quite right. They gave him a proficiency test, which is more of a placement test. And, he had way more math skills than he could show on the day that he came with all of his siblings straight from a country of war, where the air conditioner had broken down in our Welcome Center and volunteers were helping get people situated, and his family was stressed out, and their numbers don't look the same as our numbers. Even if you do give him the test in Arabic, he's not going to be at his best. And so he was not SIFE, but he looked very SIFE on paper. And I mean, I would love for you to talk to this kid. I think whoever's coming to Text TESOL this year, he may be one of our keynote speakers, because he's impressive, and we can mistake these kiddos
Yes.
just for language.
And if I can tag along with what you're saying, Carol, that's a word that I have highlighted in the book, shame on us. I think when you said shame on me, I was like, oh my gosh. I think we need to recognize that sometimes we can be an obstacle for students. We don't see the value behind that title of siphon. We don't see their potential. And if we don't highlight that potential, if we don't give them an opportunity, just a little bit ago, I retweeted an article of something that's happening in Houston, some immigrant students, just getting awards and stuff. I mean, that's an opportunity for them to highlight their potential. And if they don't have that potential from teachers, then to me, we're failing them. To me, we're just being an obstacle for them to become successful.
And I necessary because
I think Carol froze again. Does anyone want to add to what to continue the conversation?
I can't hear Katie. Can you guys hear her?
Yeah, I don't know why Katie's talking, but I
Yeah,
can't
she's talking, yeah.
hear you.
She's still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
I think she was touching my, this is Grace. I was saying that I think that amongst our PLN on Twitter, we have a very kind of asset-oriented opinion of ELLs, but that historically it's been a very deficit-oriented opinion about ELLs, and that there are many teachers who still, you know, it's not that there's anything negative in their intention, but that there's automatically some assumptions and some kind of negative, you know, oriented beliefs about what students can and cannot do. And I think that that's something that I would just love to see kind of a dynamic shift holistically, that on the whole, teachers really recognize the assets that our ELLs and our SIFE students bring to our classrooms. And it's not, oh, it's more work for me, or but I can't teach them this, or they can't do this. It's really, you know, putting the onus on us to figure out how we can reach them and how we can figure out what they really are bringing to the table, because they do have skills. And, we need to figure out what they are and not just make assumptions about what they can or cannot do.
Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so sorry about all my tech issues. We're having storms here, and I don't know why it's so bad. But yeah.
We're in the basement.
So,
can you go get her, please? I'll be right up. I'm going to bow out because my children have ended their movie, and so
I get it.
I am needed for bedtime.
Okay,
But it was lovely. It was lovely chatting with you all, and I look forward to next week.
Yeah, thank you for this. Thank you for the book club again so much. We'll wrap up with a couple of closing thoughts, and you can watch them later. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, Katie. So what about the rest of you guys? I'm sorry I missed the last of what she said, but I think we were at a part where we were talking about just, you know, the same thing about getting to know your kiddos. And I was just trying to say, don't beat yourself up. What I find the most helpful is somebody that you work with who can help you challenge your beliefs, especially in the fall, where everybody seems like, oh my God, how are we going to get there? And every week, I'm really counting on you guys to be that person for me, you know, those people for me, that we keep remembering what we believe about every kiddo, and that every day they're going to know more English, so that we don't get back down and start lowering our bar or forgetting what they can do or what they can accomplish in a year. What do y'all want to say about that, Ton?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. I was shaking my head because I was like, yeah. I was
I
going to
know.
ask you, like, what's the main thing that you want us to take away from this chapter? And you clearly said it with that point. Like, we need to find people who are going to advocate, but we need to also be the people who are going to advocate. And like, just taking up like Osama's example, like, we find ways to bring teachers' attention to the little wins that they have. Whatever the little wins are, it might be for like, I have a student named Ayaka, it might be like, she understood your sentence today. A week ago, she didn't understand anything. Like, we'll take that and look what she's doing and then focus on like the student's growth mindset, which is your next part 2. And like, if we focus not on just the act of doing, but the process of learning, we say this student is able to learn.
Yes.
They're intelligent. But they're right now on their training wheels, but just recognize that they're learning really fast, and that's what we want to do. And so just keep that in the back of their minds as we work with content teachers to say, like, they'll get there, and when they get there, they're going to shoot really far, and they're going to go really far. And we just need to magnify those mini wins, the moments of glory.
Sorry. I know, it's a mess.
It's a mess today. It's a mess today.
So I know, it's a mess. So Emily, what about you?
My biggest takeaway from this chapter is the importance of culturally awareness teaching. It goes beyond having the perfect strategy or having I could have the best strategy ever to teach something for my students, but if I don't reach over and get to know my students, I think I've lost everything. So to me, the most important is that just make that strong connection with the student, and academics go a long way. Like you were saying with your student, you failed him. Shame on you, because he saw his own potential and he had to advocate for himself because you didn't do it for him at that moment. So we have students like that. If you don't advocate for them, they will do it for themselves, and kudos to them for doing that. But if we can support that, why not do it for them?
Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I just want to say, I'm just really excited that we're having these conversations about SIFE students, because I have felt like at least the past 3 years with working with them alone in our boat in our campus. And so I'm glad that, we're having these discussions, we're doing this book study. And like Emily was saying, not only are we really pulling out those assets and looking at our students, it's like, how can we invest ourselves more in this growth mindset, but also our students? Because I know at the end of the day, when, at least for me, my classroom is constantly changing. And sometimes you do get bogged down with, it seems like I'm getting a new student, but they're here for a reason, and I'm here. And hopefully, I'm making the best experience for them, because, I'm their first teacher for some of them. So I have to also keep that in mind.
Very nice. Anybody else? Then I think we'll say bye because my tech is so bad. We have to go now.
Thank you, Carol, for running the session. And thank you for writing it. Thank you for everybody for participating and contributing. This is going to be posted live, and so people are going to listen to this. And there might be school districts that send this out to their teachers, like, just watch this.
Yeah.
Learn the book study and connect with the teachers who are below here, and then talk to them about the experience and continue the dialogue. So though we might be talking in a vacuum here, we never know who we're going to be affecting.
And I want to second what Katie said. Thank you, Carol, for keeping up with the Twitter and responding to everyone and retweeting what everything everyone's saying. And I think that makes it more exciting. Like, okay, the author of the book is going to read my comments. I can't wait to see what she has to say. So thank you for being very active. I know it's probably driving you, and I know it's a lot on you right now, but you are doing a great thing for all our students.
It's a thrill for me and to see people respond to it. And I'm learning so much from everybody's different experiences. So thank you, everybody who's interacting.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, Sarah. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Tom. Bye, Tamara.
Bye, Emily. Bye, Demet. Bye, Shelly. Bye. Bye, girl.